Numinous Podcast with Carmen Spaniola.
Hi there, and welcome to the Numinous Podcast, where we've been having interesting conversations with everyday folks about the mystery of life since 2014. I'm your host, Carmen Spaniola, joining you from the lands of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, the Songhees and the Esquimalt First Nations, recently known as Victoria, BC, Canada. I am so proud of my friend Emelia Symington Fedy for the work she has brought forth. Emelia is an author, playwright, and performer, and her new book, Skid Dogs, was named one of the best nonfiction books of 2023 by CBC. It's been shortlisted for the Huber Evans Nonfiction Prize, and it hit the BC bestsellers list just a week after publication. Publishers Weekly describes it this way: with plenty of juicy fruit, padded bras, and pot smoke, the narrative begins as a nostalgia-tinted reverie before evolving into a devastating portrait of the pre-Me Too era from someone on the other side of it. The author's candor and courage will move readers regardless of when or where they came of age. It's a raw and riveting coming-of-age story about the wild love of teenage friendships and the casual oppression of 90s rape culture, and to be honest, it was so searingly accurate, I had to wait a minute to gather myself before I invited Emelia to come on the show to discuss it. So, content warning here, we are talking about rape and sexual assault in this episode, and the impacts still felt decades on. We also get a little explicit with the language, so headphones, highly recommended. And from a trauma-sensitive stance, I'd also say it might be good to listen like while you're doing some vigorous activity like gardening or cleaning the bathroom, not like driving the car. Know what I mean? Just like keep those arms and legs mobilized, eh? Okay, let's settle in for some girlfriend talk with the wonderful Emelia Symington Fedy. So, Emelia, welcome back to the show. I'm curious to hear how you answer now this question. What identities do you lead with?
I am a white, cis settler. I'm a she, her. I live with mental health challenges. I'm a sober mother, an activist, an artist.
You're also an author.
And I forgot. And I'm an author. And here's another thing is I've recently moved back to the land in which I was raised on. And so there's something about that, and I don't have language for it, but I do attach my identity to that now. Just living on the land that my mother chose for me is a very powerful thing that I, at age 45, I'm just experiencing for the first time.
Right. So moving from like an urban to a rural identity.
Yeah. And how it's fascinating because my partner, how they integrate into the communities, they say, oh, I'm married to Emmy Symington, which is the name I had as a child. Emmy Symington, she grew up here. And that is what leads us into being invited to dinner or being welcomed to the meeting. Or I have this local cred. And I didn't even know that it was there until I moved back 25 years later, that there's a respect or a care or like, oh yeah, she grew up here. We'll give her a chance. If I had just bounced in from Vancouver, it would have not been cool.
Oh, I can totally see that. We are moving back to my husband's land, and he went to kind of reintroduce himself to neighbors up the way and discovered, oh, the man who lives there, it was his parents' land, and he was a couple grades below Ruben in high school. And so he was like, Ruben, like a
Yes.
grown man was still kind of like looking up to the guy who was a couple years older in high school, which I was like, oh, okay, that is cool. Yeah, you're right. There is a certain cred. Like I know the mores and the cultural norms from here, and I've got some of the lore and history how
Yeah.
is that for you, kind of feeling like you are returning back to the site of your childhood, your adolescence, For me, I know when I go back to my adolescent homelands, the trauma just comes rushing back. So, what is
Mhm.
it like for you to be like, yeah, I grew up here and now I'm back?
It's so it's so perfectly okay. So here's how I'll explain it. My mother, so this isn't okay. So my mother moved me and her pregnant belly, who had my brother in it, to the Shuswap region by herself. She cleared land for us to put a trailer on. And I lived there until I was 13 years old. And it was this small little town called Enderby. And we were in the bush past Enderby. And then when I turned 13, we moved to a house in the country of Armstrong, which was 45 minutes away. Enderby is only good. It's childhood. There's the place where we ate our, once a month Friday smorgasbord Chinese food. There's the place where I got my first book. It's just memories of being an innocent. That I remember this riverfront where she took me and we ate macaroni salad. It's the afterwards, the 13 on. Thank God I'm not there. I do not want to live in that town where that teenagerhood was. So it's this innocent, precious place that I've returned to. I'm on the baseball diamond where I played baseball that my son now plays baseball on. And it's only good. It's
Oh, I love that.
incredible.
I love that for you
Mm-hmm.
and for him, for your whole family.
Yes.
Okay, so this brings us to your book, Skid Dogs. Oh my gosh. I reached out to you pretty quickly and was like, okay, we need to have an interview, but I need to process because it was intense. So okay,
Yeah.
give us I don't want to describe it just as intense. It was so good, Amelia. And it was for some of us, it was a little close to the bone, is all I'm
Yes.
gonna say. So
Yes.
introduce us, please, to the premise of your book, Skid Dogs.
Okay. Skid Dogs by Emelia Symington Fedy. When I was 2011, I returned home to help my mom who had lung cancer. Was helping her because there was a girl named Taylor Van Diest who had been murdered on the train tracks right near our home where I had grown up. She was murdered on Halloween night, and it wrecked our town. It rocked us, and we were in lockdown, and people couldn't leave after evening, dusk, lock your doors. All these rules were set in place. Phone in the tips line if you see a stranger in town. My mother was in terror and she was ill. And so I unhappily dropped everything and returned to try to support her. And when I did that, I went back to the tracks. And the tracks is where, in the exact same place, and I'll never forget the moment standing there where a girl had her life taken. It was the same place that I had grown up with my girls. It was the same spot. It's the spot where all the girls congregated. The tracks were this lifeline, this kind of vein of Armstrong that girls mostly spent our time on. Hours and hours a day walking the tracks, especially in the summertime. And so to stand there as an adult and to feel the the crack, the complete like chasm between being in my childhood memories being only excellent and joyful and hysterically pleasurable, and also seeing the yellow police tape and knowing that a child was taken here. I couldn't put those pieces together, and I knew that that was my job. My job was to try to put those pieces together. So I started to write a book called Skid Dogs. And this is a slight segue here, but I do believe that we all have one story that's ours. We all get one. Sometimes we get more than one, but we all do get one. And this one was mine. This is the story I have that is of service, that I want to help and be useful with. And it's only mine to tell. And so that's why, throughout poverty, throughout having kids, throughout the pandemic, throughout not, I was focused on getting this story out. So the memories of my girls on the tracks the book goes into two timelines, 1991, where we were free, and then returns to 2011, and it flips back and forth to being a 35-year-old woman trying to help my mom die gracefully, not being successful with it, and dealing with this town in trauma from the murder. That's the general outline of Skid Dogs.
Who's the ideal reader for this book?
There's two ideal readers. One is me. One is age 35 to 55, probably as a middle-aged woman who has grown up with this nuance of sexual trauma that didn't even really know existed. We weren't ever violently raped, but we were just constantly picked apart. We were just constantly, I think the line in the book is little minnows biting the bubbles off our legs, just constantly picking at us. And what's that called? The question I had is, if it's not called rape, what's the word for the constant picking over of my body that I experienced as a teenage girl? It's for women of 35 to 55 to remember that and to be honored as that happened. That wasn't just fake. That wasn't just weird. It happened and it was traumatic.
It was traumatic.
And just because it wasn't violent and I don't remember being held down, doesn't mean I wasn't held down. So it's getting into the nuance of rape culture in the 90s. The other demographic I wrote this for is for girls now, age 13 to 17, who are living their experience of patriarchy and rape culture. And in some ways, it's probably extremely worse. And in other ways, there's probably some freedoms that they have. And so the longing to write this book was kind of like for my teenage nieces to say, this might save you some time. If you read this, maybe we can cut this if this is a crass thing to say, but maybe you won't have to suck so much dick.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe you'll read this and be like, ew, I'm not going to suck so much dick. Gross. Auntie M sucked too much dick. Like maybe I could save them
dick
some
she
dick
didn't
sucking.
Want to. Yeah, exactly. Because do I really want to and why?
Yeah. And the amount of sexual energy that I gave and engaged in and didn't want to was enormous. It was like 90% I was faking it and I was uninterested. Totally. Holy crap. To have that hit you as an adult middle-aged woman, like my identity, I was faking interest and pleasure my entire adolescence /20s / now I'm married and I'm dealing with it. Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Like now I'm actually kind of like trying to figure it out. And I call myself a radical intersectional feminist. What?
Yeah, I totally agree. So to be clear, there is not explicitly depicted, but there is mention of rape. There are incidents of rape. There's incidents of murder. So, that is happening in the storyline, but most of it is just the constant, relentless coercion and pressure and the feeling of being trapped. And I definitely, I would say in my 40s, in my early 40s, within my marriage, I needed to have almost like, it's like I became a virgin again. Like I was like, honestly, I'm just not going to perform. I'm not going to manage your mood. And I noticed that even though we're having discussion and conversation and couples therapy, I just notice how I am so shaped to pick up on your mood and just be like, you know what, this will just be easier for me if I head this off at the pass. And I'm like, I'm just not going to do that. Every time you think you've achieved some new level of like clarity, understanding, agreement, mutuality, reciprocity, your husband has, risen up to the next level of anti-patriarchy in your marriage, there's still more. It's like, actually, now I'm going even deeper into my own relationship with my own body. How many times I push through my own exhaustion, how many times I'm grasping to, yeah, make myself or someone else feel good, how about I just rest? How about I just don't? How about I just take pressure off myself, right? That there's nothing wrong here. So very much I locate that in my adolescence, and reading this book was like too many flashbacks. Holy
Yeah.
crow. Like
Yeah.
it was a lot. There
Yeah.
was also some stuff that was really fun about it though. So like what kind of research? I was like, how did she remember? You had so many great little details about the products, the slang we used, the makeup, you know, like the way you captured that era was just amazing. It was so on point. Did you have like diaries you were reading from that time? It was so vivid.
Okay, so here's something I learned about the internet while I was doing research is that it's not very specific. Like when I'm talking about jeans, the most popular jeans in the summer of 1991, I know what I'm talking about. And the internet gives me like a 5 year general range. And that's not at all the type of jeans I was wearing. Right. So it was fascinating to me how unspecific these cultural um, touch points are actually, especially pre-internet cultural touch points, because I'm like, no, the jeans were wider and there was no stitching. The stitching came in 1994. I remember that. So a lot of it, I have to say, there was a few journals that I pulled from. There's a scene in the book that happens on a Halloween night, and it was incredible to me to find a journal. And I had written what had happened that night. I came home and I wrote it down. And so here I am, middle-aged woman, reading my teenage writing. The affirmation, that was real. It's true. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not over dramatizing. I can see in print that this is true and real for me. It was so affirming. And then the other thing is talking to my girls who, we're not tight anymore, but I, would check in about the book a lot, and I was giving them drafts to read so they would continue with consent around it. And in general, what they would say to me is, you're leaving out the worst parts. Like in
Oh,
general, I was holding back. In their memory, things were actually even worse. And
really?
so,
Okay, let's give people a little bit more context. So your girls, meaning your friends at the time, your friend group,
yeah,
they are they composite characters in the book, or are they quite directly related
they're
to real
direct. Yeah,
people?
they're pretty
Okay, great.
direct. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay, great. So
yeah,
you're today being like, hey, I know it's been a while. We haven't talked in a decade. I'm writing a book about our adolescence. Do you want to read it?
yeah. All our
What was
trauma.
their,
I'm going to
yeah,
tell the
would you like
stories of
to read
all
about
our
our
trauma.
trauma? Yeah. And so what were, yeah, there's this, they're saying you've left out the worst parts. What did they really want you to remember?
They were okay. So these girls were very gracious with me. I mean, I could call them late women right now. Um, they're still my girls. They were very gracious with me with that this was my story to tell. It's from my experience. Um, there are a few stories that I did ask explicit permission. Um, so the two extremes were the unparalleled joy, the hysteria we experienced together as girls before the gaze. So if I
Before
were
the
to pick
male gaze?
before the male gaze, if I were, the touchstone I would continually come back to is the summer before the male gaze landed. What did it feel like? And if every woman could return and remember that sensation of before I cared, before I noticed, before I saw who was watching me, that to me is the world changing. If I could, if people could return to that place in their bodies, how freeing that would be. So there's that. And talking to my girls obviously reminded me of that. We would go back into our giggles and hysterics quite quickly. And then also to be affirmed and reminded by them that what happened happened. And it did hurt, and it was traumatizing, and they are working through it, and they're shocked how hard it is. That as well was affirming. And so there's this double thing that happens. I get emails from women that say, yeah, that was a really hard book for me to read. And yet there was so much healing in knowing that it was normal.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't that was happening in this culture. And this is something I'm just discovering now, Carmen, after the book is out, is 1991 to 1996 was this hyper sexualized, misogynistic time in culture. And it was right there. It was what's that guy's name? The Andrew Dice Clay, right?
Oh yeah.
Like
Oh
all these
God.
comedians that were like
Yes.
super aggressive and women hating,
Yeah.
and all the like movies like the Porkies and the freaking
Yeah. We were downstream from Me So Horny and those kinds of songs,
in the misogyny from 91 to 96 was unparalleled, and
Right.
we
I
were
hadn't
in it
thought
and we
about
didn't know.
no.
And now we're seeing it from like, years and years later, and that as well was affirming.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there's a reason why all this was happening. It was cultural zeitgeist as well. um anyway, your question left me half an hour ago.
Yeah, okay, we're elsewhere. Okay, but I think we've got it. I was curious, what kind of research you did and like what your friends' feedback was. So, okay, so many of the girls, this is in the book, the characters in the book, and me, you, many of us, we're trying to find love and safety in sexual relationships with boys. And some of
Mhm.
those boys were quite a bit older. I remember being catcalled, me and Christine Jakubowski walking down the street of Duncan, and Larry and Bobby Strang, who were like 20, we were 12, but they had the top down Mustang. They stopped in the middle of the street in their car, turned around and said, "Hey, do you girls want to ride?" And we were both giggling like, "Oh my gosh, these brothers want us in their car." And of course, we were fucking petrified. 12 years old. 12 years old we were. So
Mhm.
it's this tale as old as time, though. We still had this intense fixation on boys, only to be like dumped at the end of the summer, or only to be, dumped and they move on to the next sexual conquest. And then we are saddled with this reputation of slut. So it's so common. Part of me wonders, like, so is this just simply evolutionary biology that like girls know that mammals are safer in numbers, and so we try to pair bond, and like boys just have this instinctual thing that they have to spread their seed, and so they're constantly comparing and judging and trying to consume girls, or as you say, like how much is also the cultural zeitgeist, like it kind of it seems so pervasive then and now at all times. So what are you trying to say about that particular storyline with this book?
I think for me, I want to keep it really simple and say that this is capitalist white supremacist patriarchy. This is imperialism. This is, yeah, sure. I'm sure there's times in nature where young dolphins rape dolphins. Like, yeah, I've heard that happens. Sure, but I don't think it's overarching. I think it's hyper. It's in this culture back in the 90s and now it's hyper supremacy and it's hyper patriarchy and it's
Hyper
violence,
exploitation in
hyper
all the ways.
exploitation. Yes,
Mhm.
and it's violence and it's wrong and it's taking, and when you say the word relentless, that's exactly the word that was in my mind. I wrote this book to feel at times relentless to read intentionally. The sentences get longer, the stories get, it's sometimes a relentless read to get to the end of what happened, because that's how it felt. The
Mhm.
feeling was relentless. It was never ending. It was in my dreams. It was how I laid my hair at night. It was what I wore to bed. It was what I got up in the morning and made sure everything was about the male gaze, performance, attraction, being safe, survival. It was a sensation of surviving this world. I need someone to protect me from worse. Okay. So
Yes.
there's rape, there's horrible. We know that now. We know behind the dumpster drunk rape is not allowed. We know that. So there's that. So I need something to protect me from that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's looking for the nice guy who's just going to practice on me for 2 years. Right.
Right. We're
Like
looking for the less bad.
the
Yeah.
less bad.
Keep me
So,
safe from the worst. And this seems like an okay deal for now.
yes. And the line in the book is everyone knows a girl has to be murdered before she's taken seriously.
Mm-hmm.
The rest is just called growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's to me what I wanted to really explore in Skid Dogs is the rest, the growing
Mm-hmm.
up, the relentless monotony / hysterical joy of being a girl child in that time, and the interplay of how we used our joy and our hysteria and our violence towards each other, and all the constellation of what happened, how we used that. It was all a tool of survival.
Mm-hmm.
So now at 45 with kids and a partner, I'm having to remind myself every single night when I lie next to my partner, I'm not in survival. I'm safe.
Mm-hmm.
This person isn't going to hurt me. They're not going to leave me. They're not going to betray me. They're not going to terrorize me.
I don't have to escape them.
The
I don't have to escape this
relentlessness,
life.
the relentlessness is over.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only now I'm looking at my partner in my middle ages, breathing, going to therapy, having to process, I'm safe, I'm safe, I'm safe. And so I was like, okay, I think this is worth writing about. Like, this is an important story. Like, if I am so profoundly affected now to this day, and I have all the resources, right? Like, I'm lucky as hell. This has got to be going on for other women. This has got to be not just me who's like self-medicating with, marijuana and bags of chips and stuff. So yeah, the answer is I was right. It isn't just me. And we're pulling back. We're just getting more nuanced into the conversation. Thank goddess.
Yeah, we can be more skillful and communicate maybe a little bit better as we get older about like, yeah, this is still having lingering impacts. One of the experiences I had was really noting as I was reading, the underage drinking and sex combination. That was really intense. Even as a woman in my late 40s, 48 years old, it was wild to realize. I know it in my mind, but reading it back again in slow motion as an adult and as a mother, it was wild just how much danger we were in, and how that initiation into sex and relationships caused this like multi-decade hangover. It is still there. It is still vivid. Even I've done all the somatic experiencing, I've done all the trauma stuff, like I do feel well integrated in it, but perhaps because of that foundation of like pretty intense healing around rape and sexual violence, myself having been violently raped, but in my earlier years, it was different kinds of sexual violation, 3 different times, being able to reconcile how does it happen so often? I know that now as a practitioner. I know that now as a trauma recovery practitioner, why a person who's been sexually assaulted is actually more likely to be a victim again. I get it. But what I also noticed in the book is like the present day portions of the book, when you're in your 30s, you're kind of alluding to this, like those like nascent beginning efforts to try to connect in like a safe and gentle place instead of this emotionally deprived place. And you portray this through like the mother-daughter relationship. Like you're trying to be compassionate and understanding with her. You're with your brother, with the sibling. You're like trying to come back to some shared experience, even though you are getting all the emotional labor put on you. Still, you're trying to do it in your romantic relationships. You meet your present day husband and he seems nice, but you're also like fucking in your head and like really, sabotaging a little bit at
Mm-hmm.
times. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so can you talk more about how that time has impacted those adult relationships? Like, how did the residue of adolescent trauma shape those present day? It's like pretty clear with your husband, but what about with your mom? Did you ever speak with her honestly about what had happened to you? Did how has your brother responded to reading your book, if he has?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I never did speak honestly to my mom. I made a decision. The decision was it's too late, Em. You've missed your window to speak honestly with your mom. If you could speak honestly with your mom, you would have been in your 20s and she wouldn't have cancer and you wouldn't have life on the line here. And you would be at the beach and on a retreat together and you'd be able to do it properly. And that time has come, that time never came in your life. And so the only thing you can do for the best you can and be as kind to her as you can. There's no need to put anything on her of uh, what could have been different or the pain that was caused. Why? It's just why. So I released that with my mom. I mean, did I release it? No, it was hell, but I I did my best with my mom. And I felt like the most compassionate choice was just to try to love her the best I could with the time I had left, focused on her, not focused on me or what I didn't get. Um, with my brother, it's very, very beautiful. He did read the book. Um, and he said, yeah, I did all those things. Like I remember all those. I remember talking like that. Like he really affirmed from his point of view the small town boy life. And the word finger banging,
Oh God,
that word,
yeah.
and he it even just saying it is it's a violence. It
So
sounds quite
crude.
gross, right?
Yeah, and we used to toss it around all the time. We talk
Toss it
about it on
around.
the conference call. Remember, we'd have the party lines.
Oh,
Oh my God.
yes.
Yeah.
Oh, did he finger bang you?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
my God.
So my brother was like, oh my God, like we used to, oh yeah, I finger banged her. Like it's this kind of language that was violent that he himself it was coming to terms with. And so, I mean, my brother's a perfect example of like a man reading this book who grew up in that time and realizing, oh, I did cause harm, and not feeling a profound amount of guilt about it. There's no need for that. But like, oh, I can see how that was harmful. Yes.
Mm.
Right. Um, so that's been good. Uh, there's some healing there. Yes. With my partner, I'm just learning. I think I'm in a similar spot to where you were when you were talking about getting really nuanced with how's my body feeling right now, and is this a yes? Is this a no?
Mhm.
And there's just some things that are just not on the table anymore. Um, I have this kind of joke, like, and I'm sorry to talk about dick sucking again, but again, this is what this book is about. It's the word is relentless. And so there's language that is used that is grotesque, and I'm not going to shy away from it.
Mhm.
Um, I don't suck dick anymore, Carmen.
Mhm.
I don't suck dick.
Mhm.
That's just a line I have now. I did it too much and I don't do it anymore.
Mhm.
And I love my partner, but guess what? The penis is not central.
Right.
The penis has been removed.
Yeah.
And that is how I heal.
Yeah.
That is
True
how,
consent.
like,
Knowing that your no can be received and is a no, and it's not no for how long. Yeah. No, we've had the same thing where I was like, you know what? Moratorium on ass stuff. Like, just no. It's just a no. And I have to know that there's not even the whiff of a
yes,
wish for it. I don't even take it
yes,
to whatever, wherever, be
Yes.
wistful elsewhere.
Yes.
And
Be
so it
wistful
took a
elsewhere.
couple, yeah, it took a couple years of my partner committing to just being a safe haven, just
Yes.
being a safe haven. And so for a couple years, only I initiated, only I initiated exactly what was going to happen. When I started to feel bad, guilty, oh, oh, I should just make
They're
him,
so nice. They're such a
yeah,
good
I would stop.
partner.
Yeah, he deserves it.
Yeah.
I shut that shit down in me. Like I was
Yep.
like, no,
Yep.
is this genuine? Is this coming from he is in my care and I love him and I feel tender and I want to do this? That will bring me joy to see joy on his face. Or am I doing that because I feel like it's going to save me emotional labor down the road? Or for
Exactly.
some other reason, am I managing the
Yes.
emotional atmosphere, the weather here? How much is like true joy? And so, yeah, there's stuff that's just like not truly joyful for me, and I'm just not gonna do it. And
No.
sometimes I changed my mind on that. Sometimes I was like, okay, I'm kind of be a little hot, but the baseline here is I initiate, I'll tell you, okay, just we're getting kind of, this is a sidebar, but this is a sidebar for all the ladies who are like, how do we negotiate this? The thing that made me come back to actually want to have sex is when I married it with astro magic, with planetary propitiation. Once I realized that like masturbating could be an offering to Mars, and my
Oh,
husband would love
Jesus.
to see that, and I would love for him to just not touch me. But
Oh,
I'm like, yeah, you can totally enjoy this. I started to propitiate Mars on Tuesdays. I'm telling you, my husband loves Tuesdays. Then when I was like, you know what? Fridays are Venus. That's about union and communion and the worship and adoration of beauty. And
yes.
so he worships me like I am a temple priestess on
Yes.
Friday. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so
It's
once I was
religion.
able to, it's a religion. And so
Yeah.
once I realized like this is part of my spiritual healing,
Yes.
and it could be healing for my husband too, to be able to experience like more than just the physical, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Now it's like part of our propitiation, and now he's getting like more sex than, you know,
Unbelievable. That's a
since we
gorgeous.
were just together 15 years ago,
Yeah.
where it was like, yeah, 5 times a day or whatever. It's like, yeah, I could do that, but like, do I want to do that anymore?
Ugh.
Absolutely fucking not.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Who has got that? Yeah. Okay.
Let's see
So
how.
that is a lovely way to look at it. And I'm going to take that with me, like, for the stars, for Mother Goddess, for the earth, my body, my beautiful goddess,
Yes.
sexual, like middle-aged body. What does it want
Yes.
to do to honor? Like, I got a
Mhm.
altar in my house. I hang up all my, like stuff around to have like sensuality and like prettiness. And I also can, like work on this, but it's
Yeah.
not for the male gaze. It's not for the male pleasure. It is for me.
Mhm.
And I am including you in that.
Mhm.
And there's kind of so for me, that's a practice, right? Because I'm
Yeah.
so conditioned to even pretend that it's for me.
Hmm.
Like I'm conditioned to,
Yeah.
this is for me, for you to see that it's for me. Like it's really subtle. And so
The
I,
performative quality. Yeah.
yeah. And so my good friend, she read the book and she said, I thought, and this is wild. She said, I thought I had good sex with my husband for 20 years. I thought that I enjoyed sex with my husband. And your book made me realize that I enjoyed the feeling after sex with my husband. I enjoyed connection. I enjoyed intimacy, but I don't really actually like this stuff. Like I enjoyed feeling close and intimate with my husband, but I have to get there.
Hmm.
And she didn't realize the stuff in between, the physical, the penetration, the physical engagement was what she would do so she could receive intimacy and care.
Mm.
And now
Mm.
she's like, oh my God, I deserve intimacy and care. And I don't need, I don't have to have penetration or, before I deserve intimacy and care. And her mind is being blown.
Yeah.
Sorry, friend's husband. That's a shift for her. But she truly thought she was in this kind of empowered situation. And it's like, no, I actually just want to be cuddled and loved and cared for and feel intimate and not feel your dick on my back.
I totally relate to this where I was like, you know what? So much of my persona had been kind of like sex goddessy
Yep.
and temptress and siren. It's like you embrace the thing because it's just how you need to somehow tame this beast of the male gaze somehow. And when I say like, oh, I was a virgin again, basically I said, you know what? If I wasn't performing in sex to be sexy, to feel empowered, if I stopped performing empowerment, would I even know how to do it? And so I said to my husband, this is what's happening. I'm just going to let myself, okay, for listeners, this is with the help of my therapist and lots of somatic experiencing there, but I just brought him into my process where I was like, I am shedding my mask, my guard, which is the performance, this persona. And underneath that is a young girl who doesn't know what to do with a penis.
Yes.
If I'm not performing this virtuoso kind of thing, what if I'm just really present and looking at it? I honestly don't know what to do. And
Same.
What if I'm not performing to reach my own pleasure and I'm just literally responding to what you're doing? And it's like, okay, I really did regress to I don't really have words. I feel afraid. I feel like laughing. I feel uncomfortable. And we just worked through that with lots of other kinds of intimacy, lots of talking, lots of showing each other. This is how I would like you to touch me. This is how I want you to look at me. It was very uncomfortable. We'd already been having really hot, awesome, multiply orgasmic sex for a decade. So to suddenly be like, just so you know, I become a different person and it's a form of dissociation.
Yeah.
And even though I end up with yes, we have great chemistry, there's always fabulous orgasm. So it seems like I should be happy, but actually I needed to step into the person who comes out of my body and goes into my sexual persona. So coming out of that was quite a process, it was quite a process. And now I do feel much more integrated. I'm present with sex. I'm present with, I can say no and just be like, and he doesn't have any even whiff of disappointment. He knows that he had to do his own work, his own therapy to be how do I deal with the fundamental rejection, which is not about her. It's about my early life too, So it's been quite a process, but I do understand that idea of I was having good sex by anybody, by any outward measure. I was having great sex with an attentive partner who always made me come first, who would do anything I wanted. But I was so dissociated from those early experiences. Do you hear me?
It's the phrase my other friend says, to stay in my marriage, I had to commit to myself that I would never self-abandon again. And for me, that's stepping into that place of the sex goddess, the I'm up for anything. It's a self-abandonment. It's stepping into a role and it takes a lot of energy. And that's why I don't want to do it more than once every 10 days, because it takes quite a bit of energy to get it up. And so her rule is, am I self-abandoning? She just asks herself, am I, and that's with everything, do I want to vacuum? Am I self-abandoning? No, I'm not. I just want to vacuum. Okay, good. Vacuum. And so for me, that's a real, that's kind of a great line. Just to ask, reminding myself okay, when I'm doing this, is this for them? Am I self-abandoning? Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess it's not tonight then. And we're both going to be really uncomfortable and weird about it.
Wouldn't it be so great if the adults in our lives when we were young, we're beginning at all to have these conversations. I'd love to talk to you about the parents
Yeah.
in this book.
Yeah.
I'm calling them characters
Mhm.
because maybe they're composite, maybe they're not exact. But also there's kind of archetypal parenting styles. So there's a scene in the book. I'm thinking of it as like a parent conference, but it's the living room, the morning after a girl is sexually assaulted. And we see this encounter in one room of many archetypal parenting characters. Is there a character that you wish had been in the room? Like there's all these parents, there's the overprotective dad, there's the, acquiescent mom. Maybe set the scene and tell us, like, how did that
Mhm.
go? First of all, did
Mhm.
that happen? Because my mom would never engage with other parents on my behalf. She was just like, oh my God, if this I ever have to have a teacher have me come and pick you up from school again after basically being assaulted and you're
Mhm.
drunk. Like, this is never happening again. Don't you
Yes.
embarrass me like that. It's like,
Yes.
so the idea of all the parents coming together to be like, what are we going to do about the drunk girl who was sexually assaulted by the boy?
Mhm.
Like, did that happen? Tell us about those characters and who do you wish had been in the room at that time?
So that scene is the kind of the blossoming of the book, of the 1991 timeline of when we all decide as a group, oh, we have power. Our power is our sexuality and we're going to use it. And we actually, so this one night, not to any spoilers, but we all got really drunk for the first time and we didn't know about alcohol. Like, we didn't know to drink a beer was the same. We thought drinking amount of beer was the same as drinking amount of vodka. No one taught me about percentages. So we all got blackout drunk, and some of us were sexually assaulted, some of us not sure. And the family comes back together. The parents all join the next day to say, what are we going to do to punish you all? Because you've been bad and this is humiliating. And so, yeah, so let me just state it's true. This happened 100% hand on Bible. The mother was in the room who the night before pumped my stomach at the hospital in the emergency room, who's the nurse. That's real. The dad who the friend stole the vodka from, who was like, you deserved what you got. Maybe next time you won't be such a pig. That line is true. It is unbelievable to me. The scene, my mother crying at the grief of the loss of her child's innocence for her own sake, not her child's sake. So the woman who was just so concerned with appearances, oh, I'll pay for the cost of the cleaning to your car. It's real. It was a real. And I had someone read that story before it went to print. And she said, I don't believe this scene.
Oh, I
I
believe it
don't,
100%.
yeah. She said, I don't believe it. And I said, well, you're on page 42. So you should probably stop reading. Because if you don't believe this scene, you got a long way to go, because that scene is the beginning, girlfriend. And I realized when she said that there was a real class conversation in this book. She came from quite a bit of money, and just even the directness and the way the parents talked to the children, and the way it was kind of gritty, and it was fairly self-involved and very like how you affected us and how you affected our standing in the community. There's a class conversation going on in this book that is was intentional, but I'm realizing now when people who came from more money read it, they don't have that relationship because that's maybe not how their parents would have behaved. The person in the room that I wish was there, the mother in the room, what a beautiful question. And the answer is so clear. It's me. It's me, the mother, who I am as a mother. I would, I mean, oh, my dear girls, my beautiful girls, what can we do? I'm so sorry. I've failed you. I didn't teach you. I didn't know this was going to come so soon. Give blankets all around, pillows all around, slushes, popcorn, movies, care, love, massage. Oh, my poor, beautiful girls.
Week off school.
I was
You're not going
about
back
to
there.
say a week off school. Girls, you come here every day and I will love you and care for you. And you watch whatever you want, all the shows, and I will cook for you. My beautiful girls, I'm so sorry I failed you. I didn't know that you were this far along on your journey and that this was going to happen yet.
Mm-hmm. And
That
while
is,
we're at it, while you're watching that movie, I am headed right over to that boy's parents' house. I am headed right over to the principal right now. I am headed right over to these community members and saying, what are we going to do about these boys in our community? We're having a town hall. Are you kidding me? What are we going to do about
yeah,
these boys? They have lost their way.
yeah, we
Where
know
are
the
the men?
truck.
Where are the dads? Yeah,
Yeah,
we know the truck. We know what's happened
we
here.
know
This
what
is not,
happened.
and I'm not talking about calling the cops. I'm talking about where are your parents? And if you don't have any, son, come with me. We're going to go for a walk and talk.
Mhm.
What happened to you that you have no idea your impact on others? Like, while we're at it,
Yeah, responsibility of
let's,
where it's supposed to go. And
yeah.
so my French teacher from the high school that I graduated from read the book
Mm,
and took me out for lunch. And it was so beautiful. And she said, Emmy Symington, I remember you. I remember your friends. And I remember sitting in the staff room talking about what are we going to do with those boys. I remember the conversation. What are we going to do about those older boys? They're not being appropriate. This is not good. Those girls are young. They've just come into grade 8, and those boys are preying on them. And we see it, and we don't know what to do about it. And when she said that, my whole body just softened. Like, thank you. Thank you that it was true. Thank you that you saw it then. Of course, I wish that something had been done, but you saw it and it was true. And that was just a relief for me to know that I hadn't just made it all up. I hadn't forced it upon myself. I hadn't asked for it. I hadn't, put myself in the situation. Oh, adults had seen it and hadn't done anything. I'm curious now what it's like. Um, I don't believe it's going to be much better, to be honest. I don't believe, I think girls are now like even more shamed on like,
mm,
like now we've got like the Snapchat where the things disappear and it's just so quick
mhm,
uh, to smash someone, to
mhm.
ruin someone. It happens so quickly now. That it was a slow and steady evisceration back then, grade 8 to grade 12,
Oh my God.
your
Yeah.
the word slut just got attached to you and it grew and grew and grew and grew. And then,
Maybe you moved
maybe after when you
away.
went back and got your master's, you could come back and maybe you wouldn't be a slut anymore. I don't know.
Mhm,
Could you educate yourself out of it? But now it's just like instant.
mhm, mhm, mhm. It's so heartening, very touching to hear that the teachers saw and they knew and they were discussing it. Um, I went to a school that had only recently, it was a private school. I was there on a bursary. I was like a local kid. We all wore uniforms, so you couldn't tell who was there on financial assistance, right? And
Mhm.
so uh, I get into this school, and the patriarchy there was still, it had only just brought girls in. Like the year that I went was the first year they had grade 9 girls. So they did not know what to do about, oh, this boy fed this girl what we called shit mix at the time, just
Mhm.
pure alcohol with some Coke in it,
Mhm.
and, assaulted her in the woods. So they did not, the public punishment for drinking, the public humiliation in front of everyone. We had this thing called Wilberforce, which was ironically named after John Wilberforce, who emancipated slaves in England or wherever. But instead, what it was is the punishment at my school was um, after school, everybody else would go to sports or their activity. But if you were on Wilberforce, you would have a week of physical labor. And the first thing would be you would do 100 push-ups while the entire school walked past you to like leave class to go get changed for sports. You would get into like civilian clothes, work clothes. You would do 100 push-ups. So there'd be a group of kids, the bad kids, all doing push-ups. Then they would go and like we would weed, we would dig ditches. We would, we helped like shovel so that we could create stairs. We did trail maintenance, that kind of thing. And then at the end, when all the kids had finished their sports and showered and everything, after 3 hours, we would all go back and we would do 100 more push-ups while they all filed past us walking into the cafeteria for dinner. That was what happened when a girl got sexually assaulted. Like they were not equipped to be working with young people. Right? Like it's like, what adult in their right mind, even in 1991, what year was that for me? 1989. What adult in their right mind would publicly humiliate and punish and then kind of just be like, there, that'll learn you. It's wild to me. Wild to me. I would like to think that the adults today would behave differently, but quite frankly, the way I see adults behave to each other at times, like the victim blaming, the lack of accountability, the lack of awareness of the relentlessness of patriarchy, it does seem like girls are still trapped in just like no-win situation after no-win situation. I'm curious, what are some of the ways that we could fill in the gaps, in your view, for young girls today to kind of recognize, oh, I am being coerced constantly? How do we like step into those gaps and try to, illuminate them? And how do we like work with other adults? I'm just curious if you've had any ideas since this book has come out.
Yeah, I feel like the only way through is again to go back to the remembrance of what it was like before the male gaze. Like if it's for that girl to read the book, it's for the girl to read the book and go, I remember that summer. I remember before, and I remember how free I felt and how wild I was and how powerful I was. And I'm actually going to get some of that back. That's actually feels more better to me than the dude's protection, this wildness. And it's the reclamation for me as a 45-year-old woman, and the reclamation for my niece as a 13-year-old girl, to go back to that moment in time of wild, abandoned joy and go, I actually want to live there more than I want to live with a gaze. And so, I mean, fuck the patriarchy, fuck the man, fuck the boys, fuck censoring them, fuck that. Like, just fuck it. I have 2 boys, and my job is for them not to be centered, for them in their most loving way as boys who deserve love, who deserve to be the center of my world, who all of that, but also know they are not. Okay, so that's I've moved on to parenting. But what I'm trying to say is I feel like it's the spark of fuck that. That doesn't interest me. And so at the end of the book, there's this, hopefully a buoyant sensation. There's a little buoyancy, a little like, okay, this did happen. This all happened. It's true. It did happen. It is happening. It is alive. And like, it's the fish in the water. Like, we can't tell the difference. But the sensation of the spirit before, I'm going to try to hold on to that. And I'm going to try and get closer to that as much as possible. That's all I can offer. That's all I can offer.
I mean,
and that's the saying, like, I don't want to have sex right now. Like,
exactly. I was just going to say, I don't think, I mean, I'll have to do some deeper somatic therapy on this, but I don't think I can remember a time before. And for some of us, that is, if you were sexualized at a very early age, that I don't think I can remember a time before the male gaze where I was actually free. But I do remember giggling, joyful, being fun, being girly with my girlfriends. I remember, we would go, I lived rurally, right? We would go ride bikes and we talk about, we're like 11, we're going to ride across Canada because we can ride this like 2 kilometer strip now away from out of view of our house, like that. I remember that kind of stuff. And now as an adult, after all this process, being like, oh, just like you said, like, fuck that. I don't give a shit about that. Like, the divestment
Mm-hmm.
from the white male imagination has
Mm-hmm.
been so liberatory. People, it just happened to me again last
Mm-hmm.
night. Nice man that I know sent me a podcast. Was like, hey, do you listen to this podcast? And I looked at the name of the man who hosted it, and I said no. And he was like, oh, I think you'd really like it. And I just gave him a thumbs up. I don't have to get into it with him. Like, there's no fucking way I'm going to listen to some man's voice. I just
Exactly.
don't listen to their voices. I
Yes.
don't listen to their podcasts. I don't read their books. I
Yes.
don't watch their YouTubes. I don't give them my money. I don't give them my time. I don't give them my vote. I've just divested. And I'm sure I'm missing some lovely men out there. But like, first of all, I've hit my quota. I have a phenomenal husband. That's my quota. Anyone else outside that, if I'm missing them, well, they can go, you should take it up with your kin there. You should take it up with the other men. Hey, guess what? You're ruining it for people. But like, I don't miss it. I don't miss it. There's going to be a woman or a person of color, a queer person. There's going to be someone else who's saying and doing the same thing. And I am just finding the quality of my life is so much better since I've divested from the male imagination. So even if I can't think back, I can feel it now and I can kind of send it back to my earlier self. Like, I wish that for all of us.
And I feel like, and you can tell me if this is on point or not, is that to be able to divest, I have to get out of survival mode. I
Yes.
have to know that I can live without.
Yeah.
And I truly did not believe, and part of me still to this very moment does not believe that I can live without. I had a single mom. She raised me. She lived without the male gaze, the male attention. There's such a terror. It's been so burned into me, this terror of I need this. And so to be free from it, to truly say to myself, okay, if I don't fuck my husband, they might leave me. And that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually where I have to get to. It's actually,
Mm-hmm.
that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I will have a life.
Mm-hmm.
I am going to divest so much from this that I don't care. And you can come along for the ride with me in the not caring, but I am not going to center the penis. I am not going to center penetration. There's a lot. I'm just not going to fake anymore. And it's going to be really uncomfortable. And we're going to fight more. And you're going to have your feelings hurt because you never felt like you were that guy. You never identified with that guy. And all of this, I'm doing all of this. So I'm not in survival. So we can actually stay together forever and have grandchildren.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. Ruben and I were just canoodling the last couple of days, being like, oh my gosh, this marriage that we're in, it's so good. Like, I feel like we've been through 8 or 9 marriages. We both feel that way. Like, and this one, we're like, this is solid. This is it, babe. Like, I'm so glad we went through, and it's been 15 years.
Yeah.
And now we're, and it's been this way for some time, but not the whole time, there's been touch and go times, but after 10 years, it's like I guess I kind of went into my virginal rebirth and everything has been better since then. So, I hope that the readers come away with that potential too, that it's like, right, I can work towards not being in survival mode. That would be a wonderful gift. Okay, so we got to wrap up here, Amelia. We could go on about this forever. How do you personally now these days, how are you coping with the grief and the rage left over, the residue from that time? What are your supports right now?
In the summer, I swim. And it's a great question. I used to smoke a fair amount of pot. I used to disassociate. I used to zone out. And I'm for the first time in my adult life, I'm 6 months sober from that. And that has been healing. And so I'm not searching for ways to not feel it anymore. I'm in it more. And I have to say, so honestly, the three things are I swim, I do the Numinous Network, and like it's not a plug. It's not a plug. It just truly grounds me. I have mornings that are sacred now that I deeply value, right? Like I have a community that is I it's a sacred grounding way to start my morning. And I do less.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot work as hard as I used to work because I would work really, really hard. And then I would crash in the evening and I would sell my soul and I would just burn it all to the ground. And then I'd have to restart again in the morning. And I don't have the capacity to do that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
If I am not going to lie to myself, if I'm going to remain true to myself, I am less productive.
Mm-hmm.
I am less successful. I have less output. And that just seems to be what works. Yeah. Yeah. Water. I have a bathtub in my backyard. I get in, I don't know why, but I get in water a lot, working on my addiction and not being as excellent as I used to be
Mm-hmm.
is kind of how I survive now.
Mm. Well, the book you put out into the world was excellent.
Mm-hmm.
It's not lost on me the emotional labor you've
Mm-hmm.
done, and your people have done, your girls, and
Mm-hmm.
everyone who's read it
Mm-hmm.
surely has had to dig deep. So I thank you and your people and the place you come from
Mm-hmm.
for this great work that you've given others. It's been a long time since I was so rattled by a book that spoke so much to my lived experience as a young 13, 14-year-old girl in rural Canada, uh, from the working class.
Mm-hmm.
I've been able to explain it and talk about it and work through it, work with therapists about it. But even therapists, it's like they're from the professional class. It's just like a different thing. You got to find the one who kind of like really gets where you're coming from. And this book really got where I was coming from. And I really appreciate all the labor you put into that. Thanks for being on the show today, Emelia.
And I'm going to say one last thing that I feel proud of. Can you believe? Did you even know this? Ani DeFranco read my book.
She did.
Ani DeFranco, the queen of the feminist working class, 90s grungy. She read Skid Dogs. That's all I'm going to say. She read it. Her quote was, "This is the bravest book I've read in a long time, maybe ever."
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that a famous person, my idol, who I looked up to my whole, beginnings as a woman, is in the world and she held something that I made and she had an opinion about it. The fact that that is true and the world is so small and it is so possible. And I'm just a person. I'm just a Canadian Yahoo. I'm not, I don't have connections to Ani DeFranco. You know what I have? Internet savvy. I just sent the book to like 9 places that said she's been before. She got bombarded and decided to finally read it when she was like doing tech at Hadestown. I don't know what happened, but it happened. And the fact that that woman and me are connected now, not just through my awe, just reminds me that like, yeah, we are a net. we're a net and we're way closer than we think. And the division is patriarchy. The division isn't us. The division is something outside of us, because when it comes down to it, we're writing nice things about each other and we don't even know each other. Some of us have way more power than others. And yet we're all hanging in the same net.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. You should be proud of that. It is. It's like Stand By Me. It's very cinematic. It's like Stand By Me, but for girls, right?
Yeah, that was the goal. I was 12. I saw Stand By Me and I thought, well, what the hell? Where's the girl version? And so I wrote it. And so now the goal is for Sarah Polley to direct the Canadian premiere, obviously.
Let's make it happen, because Sarah Polley, I feel, has the nuance and sensitivity, the Canadian sensibility as well.
She'd be perfect. And the class, she's from the class as well. So I would allow her to direct my story.
All right.
Thanks, Carmen.
Go buy the book, my friend. Skid Dogs is now available in the US, so ask your favorite independent bookseller to bring it in, or just get it wherever you usually get your books. Check the show notes for links to follow Emelia on social. The show notes are in your podcast app or on your desktop at numinouspodcast.com. And of course, if this episode is still with you days later, please reach out to your local crisis line. I was a crisis line volunteer for 3 years back in the late 90s, and most of the time we were just talking to people who had no one else to talk to about things just like this. There's no shame in calling a crisis line, my friend. That's what they're there for. Okay, my listener shout out today is to Anna in the Bahamas. Anna left me a note on the Cast Feedback Numinous Podcast inbox. Anna wrote, I love how you divided all your episodes into categories. I discovered your pod just a few weeks ago, and I want to devour all of the content, but of course I have to prioritize since I can't listen for thousands of hours at a time. Too bad. This layout is super helpful. Can't wait to dive in. Thanks. Anna, you are more than welcome. I don't know why podcast players don't have this option so that, when we're publishing episodes, we can tag and categorize them somehow. Anyway, maybe that exists and I just don't know what it is. But for folks who don't know what we're talking about, episode 222 is 14 different categories. So you would go into the show notes. If it doesn't show up in your podcast app, you might have to go to numinouspodcast.com. But to read the whole thing, you'll be able to see how I've categorized all 200 and whatever episodes into 14 different categories. So you could listen based on your interest. If you want to leave me some feedback on this episode, you can write me a note or leave me a voicemail at castfeedback.com/numinouspodcast. So it's cast, as in podcast, castfeedback.com, and then /numinouspodcast. Love to hear from you. So there's a reason Emelia and I and all the cool kids are hanging out in the Numinous Network. Drama. Join us for somatics to support your healing and connection calls to help your soul recover. Find out more about the Numinous Network and sign up for my newsletter at carmenspagnola.com. CarmenSpagnola. Until next time, take care.